Good evening, dear compatriots. This is already our second broadcast of the day. In this broadcast, I mainly want to address a few statements made by the former president of Armenia, Robert Kocharian. Naturally, we will also touch upon important international issues. But the main important topic is the extraordinary summit that is to take place in Paris. We will address that later when we have new interesting information on that matter. Regarding Robert Kocharian's press conference, initially I didn't really want to address it, because I am generally against trying to bring former political figures, former presidents, back into the political arena. Naturally, this is also my criticism towards the Armenian authorities, who due to their past mistakes distanced former presidents from politics, and now a very convenient situation has been created for them to organize press conferences, make various statements. And it's interesting that right now, when Europe has found itself in such a difficult situation, it might seem difficult to them, but Europe's security could undergo major reforms. And from this, very good consequences might even arise for us. But since he specifically addressed Europe and Armenia's European relations as well, and in the end, he chose to say that as if you can't sit on two chairs, especially when those chairs are very far apart. He also mentioned that you can't understand the complex situation, the geopolitical challenges, and how this puts Armenia at great risk. He implies that Armenia has now decided to clearly move towards the European Union. Wait for it. He also says that Europe is in a very bad state, even the United States understands this, and so on and so forth. In other words, all these statements, let's not address each point on the individually. I believe you have heard that statement. Here, the important thing is that we need to understand how accurate his statements are, and let me say the following. There is only one aspect where I can partially agree with him, which is that from an electoral perspective, this will be very important for the Armenian government, but Armenia does not want to sit on two chairs. This is a fact, and Armenia will make a clear decision on what its path will be. There is no talk of sitting on two chairs here. And naturally, by choosing the European Union, Armenia must exit the Eurasian Economic Union, and everyone understands this very well. Everyone is aware of this fact. The next point is that Armenia is not facing way more pressure than what currently exists for Armenia, and for Armenia there is a significant existence. We know the bad names, where these dangers come from, and why, and the only. The main means to restrain these dangers is the European Union. It is the European Union's monitoring mission. It is a fact that since the European Union's monitoring mission appeared in Armenia, there has been no peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia at the border. There have been shootings, ceasefire violations, attacks, and so on. This is a fact that no one can dispute, not even Robert Kocharyan, and therefore, the European Union has only increased Armenia's security as it relates to Russia, and we have always reached in our broadcast that with each of our steps, we must be very cautious. But naturally, this step irritates Russia. However, at the same time, what has happened to Armenia due to Russia's actions would naturally not decrease, and its dangers would not diminish, and we might now have a completely different, much worse situation. If the European Union's monitoring mission had not appeared, had not come to Armenia, let me repeat this, it is a fact. Let me continue my thought that the European Union, which supposedly does not expect anything from Armenia, that is also a lie. And the evidence of this is the numerous resolutions in the European Parliament regarding Armenia. And if Armenia were not interesting to the European Union at all, then what business would the representatives of the monitoring mission have in Armenia? Who can say that this is not political? It is not a political ambition. The presence of the European Union in Armenia is not a major global political plan. I believe that if the European Union's monitoring mission has come and reached Armenia, then the EU has quite serious plans related to Armenia and our region. We should also consider that Georgia is also a candidate country for the European Union. Whether it wants it or not is another question. Whether it agrees or disagrees is also another question. But the fact remains, the fact is that today Armenia is considered a candidate country for the European Union, and significant reforms have taken place in Georgia. And the EU truly expects that the new Georgia will become a member of the European Union in the future. The disagreements and issues that currently exist between the EU and Georgia, I believe, will be resolved in time, and those problems will be solved naturally. But Georgia is not giving up on its candidacy, and alongside the state flags of Georgia, EU flags are hung everywhere. Therefore, the EU is already in our region, and Turkey is also a candidate member of the EU, so Armenia is very much expected in the EU. And if the EU did not expect Armenia, they would not have tried to help and be useful to Armenia, even through the Peace Foundation. In other words, the thesis that no one is waiting for Armenia does not correspond to reality either. As for Russia, its claims that it supposedly has not betrayed Armenia, has not abandoned Artsakh, and has not betrayed all those statements, they really seem like attempts, to justify Russia in every way, that Russia is not to blame for anything, that what happened with Artsakh occurred, Russia is not to blame, that the military political leadership of Artsakh is now facing challenges, and Russia is not to blame. The Russian peacekeeping forces are not currently in Artsakh, and Russia is not to blame for that either. In fact, Russia is not at fault in any matter, and even when an attack occurred on Armenia, it turns out that Russia is not to blame for that either. I don't even like to say Russia, but rather I prefer to say, the current government of Russia. And according to Kocharian's logic, which he again compares with street logic using street vocabulary, when you abandon your friend or you don't know such a comparison, a street comparison, fights, confrontations and so on, it should not have a place in politics, but unfortunately we see that such a comparison is made, but even there I think he cannot understand it correctly. One simple truth is that Armenia did not abandon its ally, and the 44-day Artsakh war began. At that time, it became clear that Russia was supporting Azerbaijan when an attack occurred on Armenia's state borders, especially in the direction of Yermouk, where a significant incursion took place. The CSTO did not respond in any way, but Mr. Kocharian again justifies Russia, trying to justify Russia in every way, as if Armenia is to blame. I am surprised by this kind of patriotism. I did not want to believe that such a so-called patriotism exists when your country is blamed for everything, when your country's leaders are blamed for everything. I understand that there are personal interests, business interests, personal reputation mutations, and so on. But in any case, I cannot believe that he does not know the reality and does not see what has really happened to Armenia, and who is to blame for all that has happened to Armenia. In my view, Robert Kocharyan now imagines, and it is possible that he has also received signals from Russia. He thinks now is a very good moment, a very convenient and right time to make such a statement, even recalling Margarita Simonian and trying to justify why that poor girl is not allowed to enter Armenia and so on. In other words, he was trying in every way to justify Russia and blame the Republic of Armenia everywhere. In my view, right now, within just a few days, there is an interesting situation. We will see a new reality in the relationship between Ukraine, Europe, and the United States of America. Let me say that this reality will definitely not be bad for the West and Ukraine. I already see the prerequisites for this in the current slight escalation and uncertainty. Interesting attempts to test the strength of this partnership that exists between the West, and therefore now a very interesting peace can be jointly led by the West regarding the South Caucasus and Ukraine, referring to the collective West. Naturally, I do not want to make mistakes there are dangers, especially concerning our region. Such dangers exist because today is crucial. During that meeting, we might not know all the details of what will be discussed about us, but they might also discuss issues related to the South Caucasus. But I am optimistic and will explain later why. Let's move on to his other claims regarding Syunik, where he supposedly did not want to exchange Syunik for Nagorno-Karabakh. Here too, he was simply trying to justify himself and say that he is not to blame, and so on. Overall, the idea of that press conference is clear, but let me repeat one thing for myself. It is unclear how you can engage in politics and generally make statements that do not correspond to reality, which can harm your country. That's all regarding Robert Kocharyan's statement. I don't want to address outdated statements either, because if we delve into that statement, our broadcast will become very lengthy. And I am generally against different people starting to discuss Robert Kocharyan's statement now, as it is pointless, giving more resonance to the place. His statements, it would have been much better if he had accepted Nikol Pashinyan's debate proposal, and they had a debate, although that too would have given him a dry propaganda opportunity. The less the media covers his statement, the better, as well as the statements of former political figures and presidents. I believe that the more new political forces there are, the better. In the political arena of Yerevan, in the political field of Armenia, it will be much better for the Republic of Armenia. It will be beneficial if new political forces criticize the Armenian authorities, rather than the former political forces, which are only involved in foreign affairs of other countries. With that statement, let's address international issues in Armenia with the United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio. From Israel, he has already arrived in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh, where a meeting is going to take place. Besides that, it is very important to mention that Marco Rubio, in one of his interviews, announced that first, this meeting will take place between the United States and the Russian Federation. After that, Ukraine and the European Union, European countries, will be involved in this new negotiation process, and he clearly explained that European countries should also be involved, because European countries have also imposed sanctions on Russia and have helped Ukraine with weapons and ammunition, meaning they have been involved in the Russian-Ukrainian war. You remember during the previous broadcast and several previous broadcasts, I clearly stated that it is impossible for Ukraine not to join. Ukraine and the European Union will not join the negotiation process. In fact, Marco Rubio is now saying that it is essential. Both Europe and Ukraine will be involved, and on the other hand, it is very logical that the meeting is now taking place bilaterally, as it is possible that Russia refused the first meeting for the Ukrainian side and the European side to also participate in those meetings. This means that the position of the United States, even at the level of statements, is changing, and we see how quickly the statements and the position of the United States are changing at different levels of statements. Here, I also find it important to mention that Marco Rubio visited the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem and also met with Armenian clergy. And here too, one can clearly express the idea that the new administration of the United States places significant importance on Christian values, and in this regard, there are interesting new approaches concerning Armenia, which of course you may not be aware of. During Trump's previous administration, and from this we must naturally, absolutely and definitely take advantage. This was a very important step, and that visit and meeting with the Armenian clergy. Naturally, this can also remind us of many things, but we must conduct an active policy, about which I have repeatedly expressed and spoken. And finally, regarding Ukraine, I can also add one thing, that Volodymyr Zelensky is now going to visit Turkey, where a meeting will take place with Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and there, one of the main topics of discussion will be the Russia-Ukraine war. Indeed, it was very surprising that recently, regarding Turkey, there was an announcement that Turkey is also joining this negotiation process or could become a platform. I think Erdogan will definitely not miss the opportunity, to make such proposals, and let's see what Erdogan and Zelensky will discuss. There were also reports in Turkey that Zelensky's wife is visiting, will visit, or has already visited Riyadh, but at this moment that information are not confirmed, and this announcement as well. Marco Rubio clearly indicates that this meeting, which will take place tomorrow, between America and the United States will only be a bilateral meeting between America and the United States. That's all for now, dear compatriots. Once again, I urge you to definitely like and subscribe to our channel. Goodbye. See you.